One thing I wanted to talk to you about loading double rifles. They don't really load any different than any other muzzleloader. I mean, it's powder, patch, and ball, and ram it all down, and by volume, not by weight. Just like any normal muzzleloader, running some normal black powder. I'm running 2F in these because these are 10 bores. The only thing I did want to talk about though is because you're dealing with 2 barrels, it is pretty easy to mess up your loads. You know, dump double charges and double balls and stuff down one barrel and not load the other. Because you're dealing with 2, it can be easy to make a mistake. So one of the things that I do as just kind of precautionary measure is whichever barrel I'm going to load first, I'll take my rod and take my ram rod and leave it in the barrel I'm not loading. And that way, you know, I can dump my powder, I can patch and ball and get my start going, and then I know that you know, I haven't dumped anything down the wrong barrel because I've got a ram rod sticking out. It's pretty easy to tell which barrel you're working with. Once I get this other barrel rammed all the way down, I'll leave the ram rod in there on top of the load, and that way I can load this one and know that I've already got a load in the other one. So it's just a good safety precaution to you know, leave your, if you're using your normal ram rod, I'm using a range rod, but if you're using your normal ram rod, you know, drop it down the barrel you're not going to load, do your loading procedure, get your start, then ram your ball down and leave your ram rod in the top of that loaded barrel, and then you can start loading the other one, and you'll never mess up and put an extra charge or an extra ball or anything in the wrong barrel this way, because you've always got an indicator that tells you which one you've loaded and which one you haven't. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to get these loaded up and start doing some load development and see if I can get it all worked out to the best load today, and hopefully my weather will hold out long enough. Looks like it might start to rain here a little later, but for now I'm going to keep shooting until the weather catches up with me. Probably noticed that I haven't been doing those back to back, you know, like a right left like you would if you were actually hunting with it. Reason for that is because I'm actually trying to take my time and really make some slow, precise shots and worry about my grouping and my load development right now. When I get them all regulated and everything, I'll try and remember to do a video and show you how good they work when you're doing, you know, quick follow-up shots. So, but for now I'm doing just load development, so I'm trying to work on my accuracy more than anything else. You can probably hear the breeze is starting to pick up a little bit, and so I'm going to show you what the target looks like. I'll walk this down range here in a second and show you what the target looks like. The groups are starting to pull together. I'm not quite there yet, but they're starting to look decent. And I'll show you what they look like and explain where I'm going with this, and then I'll probably call it quits for the day because the breeze is starting to mess with my accuracy. So you can see that as I've been adjusting the load and whatnot and changing loads, these groups are starting to come together. This is not too bad on the right barrel. This is not too bad on the left barrel, but I'd really like to close that group up a little bit, so I'm going to keep messing with the loads. I've got a ways to go yet, obviously, because really at 25 yards I really should have like a one-hole group here, and it shouldn't be spread out quite this much. Granted, these balls are bigger than 3/4 of an inch in diameter, so I mean, it's never going to be a real tight group, but it's going to be pretty good. If I can get this to squeeze in just a little bit, and if I can get this group to close up at least to looking like this one, I'll be real happy with it, and then I can start messing with regulation. You know, really though, I should be able to get pretty much one-hole groups out of both barrels, so I'm going to keep tweaking with it and playing the load up and down until I find that sweet spot, and try and find that common load that's going to give me the best accuracy. For today though, the breeze is starting to pick up pretty good. You can see that these last couple shots that I made with this load I've been working with, the wind's been really messing with me, so it's getting me outside of my group. Anyways, I'll pick this up again, and hopefully tomorrow the weather will be good again for a few hours and I can come out and try it again. But you can see that the loads, it's starting to develop, and once I get my loads, my groups down to both sides looking at least this good, then I'll be able to kind of start working with regulation. So I've got a common load developed that's shooting pretty much touching groups from both sides with the same load, same amount of powder, same patch, same everything. So that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a common load that will group up both barrels the same and get really nice tight groups out of it. And I'm right there with the load for this so far. So now I'm ready to start doing some regulation to bring bring those two separate groups down to basically parallel width of the bores on horizon. And the way I start that is you can see I went and put some clamps back on here because I'm going to start heating this up to loosen this solder and make some adjustments, and I don't want my ribs to come loose from the solder coming loose, so I want to keep my ribs in place. And then I've got a little tool here, and there's nothing special or fancy about this. It's just a handle, a wood handle, keeps the heat from transferring in my hand, and then it's got some bushings on it that I can change out or adjust for width or size. And they just are a real nice slip fit. They're not super tight or super loose, but they just have a real good fit to them. And so what I'll do is I'll do just like I was doing when I soldered these ribs on to begin with. I'll take the rods from my furnace and slide a couple of those rods, those hot rods from my furnace in here, and I'll swap them out a few times till I get the solder loosened up. And it's going to loosen up, these first 8 or 10 inches of solder here, and that's really what I want. Is I want this first section here to be loose. When I get that solder loosened up, I know from my target that my right barrel is shooting higher than my left barrel, and so I'm going to want to twist this down this way so that it moves the right barrel down, left barrel up. And I'm going to keep making small adjustments and letting it cool. Make a small adjustment and let it cool, and then go out and shoot it and see where the pattern changes. See if I get closer and closer to the horizon line. So both of these are on the same horizon line with the target. And once I have them on horizon, then I'll do the same thing. I'll make small adjustments by heating this up and loosening the solder and clamping this. I know that it's shooting wider and not crossing. The right barrel shooting to the right and the left barrel shooting to the left. So what I'll do is when I get them both down on horizon, then I'll start working on bringing them together to be at parallel distance. And the way I'll do that the same way is I'll use the rods to heat it up, and I'll pull this wedge out a little bit and squeeze the clamp down on it and then let it cool. And I'll just make some small adjustments doing that and go out and shoot it in between those adjustments and see how much movement I'm getting on the patterns and the common groups. So that's where I'm at this morning. Is I'm going to work on getting this thing on the same horizon, and then I'll start working on bringing them together. Well, I'm waiting for this to cool, and it is still pretty warm. I thought I'd mention a few things that should be kind of obvious, but it's worth mentioning anyways. One thing is you always want to swab these really good between shooting it and working on regulation. What you really don't want to do is cook your fouling into the rifling. It's kind of a pain to clean up after that. It takes a bit to soften it up if you cook it down until it's hard. So you really do want to swab these good between shooting it and regulation changes. The other part is you really want these things to cool down until they are absolutely cool. You don't want to try and rush this process. It does take some patience and some time to do this, because I'm taking this well past the ignition point of black powder to get that solder to loosen up, and you don't want to be dumping powder into a hot barrel that could ignite it right in your face. So obviously you want this stuff to cool down to where it's down to where you can touch it basically. So it takes a little patience to do that. You can't quench it. Quenching it would seriously mess with the barrels, so it takes some time, but it's a pretty simple process. Making these adjustments this way, what I'm doing is moving that split wedge up and down this way, and then later I'll pull that wedge in or out to get them to come together where I need them to. One thing that does happen sometimes is when you start making adjustments on this, your ribs will start to kind of twist, and so sometimes you do have to reposition the rib a little bit to get it back to level and flat on the surface. But I'll worry about that after I get the regulation pretty close. Once I get the regulation pretty close, then I'll start worrying about shifting the rib over when I make the final adjustments. So just a few things to mention there. Worth knowing that you want to be careful when you're doing this and make sure that everything cools down properly, and that you swab your bores really good. So based on my last set of shots for doing the load development, they originally were about 5 inches off of horizon from left, or the left and the right were about 5 inches off of each other on horizon, and so I made an adjustment, and then I came out and I shot an R1 and an L1, and you can see that it closed that 5 inches up to about an inch and a quarter or so inch. And then I took it back in, made another adjustment, let it all cool again, and then I came back out and made an R2 and an L2, and you can see by the distance here that they're only off about 1/4 of an inch from each other on the horizon line. And so that's pretty much where I'm going to stop for messing with the horizon. I mean, I could work it down and probably get it just a little closer, but honestly, that close is really acceptable for being right on. And the fact is that could be me as much as it is the gun. So that's where I'm going to stop for the horizon. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on closing these in. And you can see I'm about 5 inches on this side and about 4 on this side. And so what I'll do is I'll start moving these barrels together by heating it up and pulling that wedge out, and doing the same thing. Pull the wedge, make a shot, pull the wedge, make a shot, and see where I end up at. Obviously I'm still having to use this as my sight, because I haven't messed with the sights yet. They're not cut in, and so I'm having to aim clear down here to get patterns up here on the middle of the target. That'll all get corrected when I move out to the 50-yard line, recheck my regulation at 50, and then cut the sights in for their final sighting. So it'll get it up on target when I'm done finally. But for now, I'm using this location down here to sight at, and it's giving me holes up there, 9-10 inches high. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to start moving these together next, and I'll show you how it looks when I get a little farther along. So what I'm going to do here is heat these up again. I've already swabbed them down and cleaned them. I'm going to heat them up again, and I'll pull this wedge out just a little bit, tighten the clamp down. That'll pull everything together, and then I'll let it all cool again, and I'll see what I've got from there. The one thing I do want to be careful with is, now that I have these pretty close to being on horizon, I want to be careful not to let them twist back the other way. I want to keep them where they're at. So this clamp does need to be kind of snug to hold everything in place, and then as I pull this out, I want to tighten it down so that everything stays on the horizon line. I have had it happen where it has slipped back, and I've had to come back and redo the horizon later. So a little bit of caution there, just to keep everything in line and keep things tight so that it stays where it's at, and just work this wedge out a little at a time. Well, you can see I'm down to the end of the day here. Wind's picking up, and I'm pretty much going to call it a day. I'm going to make one more adjustment in the shop, and then I'll come back out and shoot it in the morning. But you can see in the process of getting these pulled together, from the wide spread down to trying to get them narrowed up, I lost a little bit of my horizon line here. I'm about 3/4 of an inch now instead of 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to have to tweak that back just a little bit. But you can see they're coming together pretty nice. It's about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inch spread across there now. And honestly, this is reasonable hunting accuracy here, but I know for a fact that I can do better than this, and so I'm going to go ahead and keep working with it a little bit, get them down on the horizon closer, and get them closer to parallel width with the bore line. So I'm almost there though. Maybe one more adjustment, maybe two, and I think I'll have her down to regulation.